Welcome to the Spinning Our Gears podcast. As a reminder, the issues, views, and opinions discussed on the podcast are those of the hosts and their guests and do not reflect that of any department, agency, city, municipality, state, or country. All characters and individuals discussed on the podcast should be considered fictional for entertainment value. Blue Falcons, don't go getting it twisted. This show is rated explicit and listener discretion is advised. If you aren't cool with that, hit the X and find something else. We are on all major podcast and social media platforms. The best way to get a hold of us is www.spinningourgears.com. Without any further fanfare or ado, here are your hosts, Turk, Swagger, Erica, Kenyon, and this is the Spinning Our Gears podcast. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Spinning Our Gears podcast. It is me, Turk. You've got just me today from the co-host, but we do have a very, very special guest. I think you guys are going to like him. Happen to, I don't want to say hook up with him, but happen to get his information because he's also on the Thin Line Rock Station. But he's got a little program that he's got going on the side that I think you guys are going to like. I'd like to welcome to the show, Josh. How you doing, buddy?
Good, man. Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be
here. Good. Can you pronounce your last name, because I always get it wrong whenever I try to pronounce someone's last name?
It's Grandinetti. It's very Italian. Grandinetti.
Gotcha. Now, for those of you listening, this is a little bit different because Josh is a firefighter. Everyone hold your breath. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through it. We got a firefighter on the show, but I think it's going to go just fine because Josh is the founder of Foundation Fortified, which is a mindfulness program, correct?
Yes, sir. It's a mindfulness platform I'm trying to build for first responders of all disciplines, dispatchers, cops, firefighters, and even paramedics and EMS.
And this is going to really roll really well with our last episode because we talked about that mental health go bag to have, and a lot of what we were talking about was grounding techniques and things like that. So I think this is going to go very, very well with that last episode. Before we dive into it, though, Josh, can you give us a little bit about your background and a little bit about your career background?
Yeah, man. So I'm 35 years old. I was born and raised in the hot state of Arizona. So I've been basically on the same street corner most of my life. I became a firefighter about 15 years ago. I was actually going to college to study neuroscience. And I ended up meeting this woman who was a firefighter for a local department, and she taught a course I was taking. And I was so captivated by her know-how, what she was up to in her life, and her capabilities. I just completely abandoned course and said, there has to be something about the career to make that kind of a person possible. So I became a firefighter, and I got my first career gig at Gila River Fire. It's an Indian reservation. I worked there for 4 years, and then I jumped over to a department I'm currently with called Eloy Fire, and I've been with them now for getting close to 9 years, and I've been a captain for 5 of them. So,
and no, was that a switch because it was a bigger department, closer to where you lived? What was that about?
At Gila River, I was very young. I wanted to see if I could go to a different department and grow a little bit. So I actually worked for a much larger department for a very short period of time called Scottsdale Fire. And what I learned in that change was not all departments, not all personalities can kind of mesh with the same organization. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, I left them almost as quickly as I arrived there and found my way into Eloy. So I did work for Scottsdale Fire for a brief period of time. I was only in the academy for about a month, and then I left and found my way into Eloy. So
And you said you've been a captain there for 5 years now?
yeah, 5 years, 5 years,
That's
and
awesome.
it has been the fastest 5 years of my career. I
One
became
of
a
the big things
captain
that.
right
Oh, go
into
ahead.
COVID, and it just hasn't slowed down since.
Yeah. I'm assuming that you guys are not just fire, but also you do medical waiting for like EMS to get on scene, like a lot of other places.
Yeah, we run our own ambulances at Eloy, so I actually work as a paramedic on an ambulance on a fairly regular
Oh,
basis. So
okay.
we'll switch calls. If there's a medical call that kicks out, two of my guys will go handle the medical call in an ambulance, and if there's anything of fire emergency response nature, we'll take the appropriate apparatus, the engine, the ladder if necessary, a tender. It all depends on what the dispatch comes over as, and what we're seeing from our driveway, from our apron. So
Okay. So like in my area, we've got the fire department, and they'll usually be first on scene for medicals, but then we have like EMS and ambulances usually a city away, and then they'll come if the person needs transported. But we don't have that together. That's pretty cool.
yeah,
How
some of the
did
larger departments out here do the similar thing, but Eloy is a
Yeah.
very small town, very
Okay.
limited resources. So we try
Sure.
to stretch our crews as well as we can without sacrificing, our ability to respond. So,
How much did COVID impact you guys then?
I can't claim to say that it impacted us in any special or unique way. My department just faced the average same struggles that every department and every field faced, trying to adjust our lives now to this looming threat of whatever is or is not going on, right? It really was just a lot of that, and trying to train young people coming in through all of that, trying to maintain staffing through all of that. The whole picture of that time was very difficult. And I
Yeah.
think I think a lot of departments, I think a lot of public safety is kind of starting to find our way through that matzo ball. You know what they say, public safety is always a couple years behind, in a
Right.
way. Um, but I think Eloy is finally trying to grow out of that and move past it and see through the problem that we faced. So
Well, I know that this is going to be more of a mental health episode, but you being a captain, I'd love to know what are some of your thoughts on leadership, some of your, I guess, pieces of advice that you could push on for those looking to get into leadership. That's the other part of our podcast.
you know when I decided I wanted to become a captain or I wanted to take that next step, it all boiled down to really just one limitation that I noticed many of my supervisors were lacking. And if we're honest about ourselves, we're all lacking. And that was just the powers of attention. You know, if we're honest about the screen time notifications that come across on our phone every Saturday or Sunday, many of us are spending hours a day on 10-second video reels or
Yeah.
clickbaity, information that's coming across our phone. And we're doing this for hours at a time. We're living like goldfish in a way with our attention. And so for me, if you want to be a good leader in today's world, it's never been more difficult in a way, but it's also never been easier. If the most important thing that you can cultivate to be a leader in today's world is to be able to give your attention to the responsibilities that you say that you'll take up. And I honestly think that's the key to being a leader in this day and age, given the fact that our attention is so, aggregated across so many other platforms and systems and emails and whatever else that we have going on. So,
Yeah, follow through is a huge thing, right? Living up to your word and being a man or a woman of your word is huge because as soon as that trust is broken, it takes twice as long to fix. So have you noticed issues of, I guess, leadership not taking care of their people, not working down as opposed to looking out for themselves and from the fire world or in your area in Arizona?
I think that's almost going to be anywhere in any field at any point. And the one thing I'll never take away from any first responder who's put in a career is it does take effort to show up every day, to put on a different uniform, to represent a different, not a different set of values, but just a more rigid set of values that you otherwise would in your own life, right? And we all know what that struggle is, and some people throughout their careers adjust well and cope well through some of that struggle, and then some of us fray as we get older in our careers. I think some of the leaders throughout Eloy Fire's history obviously haven't been, the most capable of all leaders, but they were incredibly capable men who
Yeah.
built this department from the ground up, right? From the concrete slabs themselves. And I'm not anywhere near that handy, right? But they didn't know how to train their people as well, right? They didn't know how to grow and develop you as a person. They just knew how to get you to work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there's some of that, and I think Eloy and just the fire service in general is going through a lot of change right now. For the first time in my area, fire departments aren't hiring firefighters very easily. It
Yeah.
used to be when I tested, 1,000 applications would go out for 2 jobs,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And now even the largest departments around us are keeping their application processes open for months past the due
Mm-hmm.
date just to get enough people to put their name on paper. So everything's very topsy turvy in public safety these days.
Yeah, law enforcement's the same way, man. Like like you said, I think my first career or my first gig, there was 350 people that showed up for one spot. Like now you're lucky to get four, you know. So it is
Insane. It's,
absolutely insane.
and I think even that goes back to kind of what we're talking about with attention. It's getting harder and harder to make younger people understand what it's like to give 20, 25 plus years of your life to a single cause and then
Yeah.
to reap benefits later down the road. Because, to be a first responder is to live a fairly comfortable lifestyle.
Hmm.
No one out here is rich, but hopefully we aren't struggling to put our boots on our shoes either, our boots on our feet. Um, but we do all kind of hold that hope that after a certain amount of years of service to the community, we'll be able to lay back with some of our financial problems taken care of for us in retirement, and that's a very fortunate thing to have. But it's not going to make you rich, and it's not going to change your life. But in a lot of ways, there's almost no way for. I think I lost my train of thought. I think I lost my train of thought. Oh no, it was a point about attention. That's perfect.
Well,
For my attention.
you were talking about bringing new people on and the struggles that you're dealing with there, and then
That's
the
right.
train of
That's
thought.
right. And just a young person's ability to commit to doing 20, 25 plus years. So many of them don't even understand what it means to give that amount of time to
Yeah.
anything, to anything. So I just don't see the problem of hiring going away anytime soon either.
And are you guys so like on the law enforcement side, we're having an issue where a big part of our training program is common sense and a little bit of it is courage. And the applicants that we're getting in, instead of seeing that common sense click or that courage click within the first 4 or 5 weeks, it's taken 10, 12 weeks before we see that, if we see it at all. Are you having that same issue over on the fire side, or is it a little bit different because you guys' calls are different?
I can't speak for other departments' struggles. What we're struggling with in my small part of the world is just finding enough qualified people that want to do the job.
Yeah.
That just seems to be the biggest struggle. We're either finding people who will do the job and will show up, but kind of don't want to do much of the hard labor, right?
Yeah.
Or we have people that can do a lot of the hard labor, but literally want to go and do something else after learning more finer parts of the job about.
Yeah.
It's not just about fires and the hero stuff. You gotta see a lot of suffering. You gotta see a lot of difficult things, and some people just don't have the wherewithal to want to deal with that anymore either. So, I don't know. I don't know.
You talk about the short attention span. Are you guys seeing the same thing where you're getting about 5 years, somewhere between 3 and 7 years before that new recruit is either leaving for another department or getting out altogether?
Oh, that's almost exactly the timeline. Three
Yeah.
to five feels
Yeah.
like right on the money. For a little while, I think it was almost easy to blame the department for the retention issues,
Yeah.
and our administrative staff was able to kind of play the long game and showed us that it's the entire field. It's just the entire field. But I think an inability to maintain our attention on even our duties, our responsibilities, what it is we're trying to achieve, not just this afternoon or tomorrow, but over the long haul. I don't know how many people have a plan for their life. We have some imagined future we want to find ourselves in, but there's almost nobody planning how to get it. And how can we, in a world that's changing so darn fast? We don't even know what's going to be important next week, next month.
Yeah.
Everything just seems to be so quick anymore. I almost think it's a train that's going to come off the track if we can't find ways of getting our attention, getting a sense of calm, getting a sense of stillness about our communities, about our lives, and everything we're up to as people.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way of putting it too, because especially on the law enforcement side, the retirement date is what we're looking at, but then we have such a problem of looking even 4 feet in front of us. It's always what's in the now, right now. And like you said earlier, we have a terrible habit of always being a year or two behind anyway. So we don't seem to look forward in the future enough to plan for that, and then it's kind of creating more problems for us as we go along. So
Go ahead.
No, I just want to say it's almost good to hear, or nice to hear, that other professions in other states are seeing that as well. What's going on, everybody? Sorry to take a break from the show, but I was wondering, are you looking for some coffee to start off your day right? Maybe some protein to mix into that coffee or after your pre-workout? Are you looking for an awesome radio station to listen to when you're not listening to this podcast? Then I've got some places for you to check out. The first being RisenWarriorCoffee.com. You know them, you love them just like we do. They've been with us since the beginning. They've got all sorts of amazing flavors and some merch of their own to check out. www.RisenWarriorCoffee.com. Use the code Turk and Swagger at checkout for 10% off your first order. Then go to Millicor.com. If you go through spinningourgears.com first, you can click our merch website, our sponsor website. That'll get you to Millicor. You'll have a discount code from us as well there. And then, when you're done listening to this episode, go to the Thin Line Rock Station. That's right, that flag back there. Go to the Thin Line Rock Station. They've got all sorts of good music all week long. You can listen to me on Fridays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 Central. It'll be a good time. All right, back to the show.
Well, it's an interesting distinction you make about what you just said. You said, it's all about the now. Nobody thinks ahead. And you would think somebody like myself would be promoting to live in the now. And there's a difference in how we experience that, though, right? So we say we're living in the now, okay? And here we are doing whatever it is we're doing. Right now, you and I are having this conversation. Hopefully your listeners are engaged with what we're saying. But many of us are trying to distract ourselves from the moment, right? We're always in an effort to distract ourselves from our present thoughts, feelings, or emotions. I mean, how long do you wait in a doctor's office before you grab your phone to distract yourself with something to keep you occupied, right? People are living in the now in a way that is like lighting a match, right? It's not really going to draw any true warmth or fulfillment, okay? It's just a quick burn of a video reel, or that next restaurant you want to go try, or that next series on Netflix, or whatever you're burning at any given time. But very few of us have a grounding, something that gives us purpose, something that gives us fulfillment. And many of us as responders, we were promised that our jobs would do this. But something feels hollow. Something has been lost in our communities throughout the last 20 years or so. And us as responders are beginning to feel it. And as people, we're beginning to feel hollowed out by this constant false nature of digital nonsense coming over our devices constantly, right? So I feel like in a lot of ways, people are just lacking a basic sense of fulfillment, a basic sense of structure within their lives that really gives them purpose. As people's religiosity has gone away, as education has been more and more disrupted, as we've become more and more isolated into our homes, there just isn't that sense of community anymore. And first responders are still having to go out into communities and find it, right? But our communities just seem to be eating themselves alive. And so it's just hard to know where the right path is, where the right direction is. But mindfulness really can give you a moment to consider all the ways in which you're experiencing the world, ways in which you are moving about the world, and almost what it feels like to have a sense of self, and what it feels like to lose a sense of self in a way that constantly keeps you chasing that next match burn. Does this make sense on some level?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, and it's almost going to sound like a terrible pun. I don't mean for it to be that bad. But with all of this regression and this disconnection, what fuels your fire as a firefighter to continue, I mean, from a personal level, to continue going out there every day and to continue providing that top-notch service to the community that they deserve?
Well, that's a great question. I've actually been out for quite some time. I injured my right knee back in November on Thanksgiving. My crew and I went out there to have us a little game of football on Thanksgiving morning, and captain was trying to show the young man how to do it, and I snapped my knee. And I've kind of had an extended period of time to consider that question. What is it gonna be like to go back after being demobbed as a government entity for so long? I've been able to grow this beard out, and I've never been able to have a beard, right? I mean, firefighters have to have the mask. First thing I said when I got injured is, I'm going to grow a beard for a little while. But when I go back, I think the thing that fuels me more now than ever, what fuels me now more than ever, is just a real connection to not only myself, but the way in which I want to present myself to others. I really enjoy when my guys come and ask me questions, and not even the questions that you would be expected to be asked as a captain, like, how do you pull this hose, or how do you do this maneuver, right? But they ask me questions about their families, and they ask me questions about their careers, and they ask me questions about their loved ones. And I've always believed that if you can make a good man, you can easily make a good fireman, right? I've seen plenty of unit men who were so disrupted in their personal lives that they couldn't even do the basic skills of answering the call and providing a good service, right? But I've seen plenty of out-of-shape firefighters, quote, out-of-shape firefighters, who are just the best bedside mannerists, and the community members just love them, right? So I think there's a balance to all of it, and I think the thing that fuels me more than anything as a captain is just being able to give quality direction toward young men who are all seeking the same things that we all are, right? A stable career, a good family, maybe some fun experiences to go out and have, and a basic sense of purpose, right? That's what really drives me, and I'm hoping when I go back to be able to get all that connection with my guys back. I miss my crew and I miss my guys. So
yeah, I know for a long time I pushed off being an FTO because I didn't feel like I was ready. Was a big part of it. But I will tell anyone out there, whether it be fire, EMS, police, there's nothing more self-rewarding than being able to put that effort into a new recruit and seeing that moment where it clicks. And I can only imagine, like you said, being a captain where you're passing on that advice to the people that have already made it through training, and seeing that kind of click for them has got to be one of the most rewarding things out there.
It is really cool. I think one of the things I enjoy the most is training somebody on how to pump and drive the truck, right?
Yeah.
You get this wide-eyed individual who is fairly excited to put their hands on all the levers and everything. But as they walk up to the truck for the first time, the excitement starts to dwindle, and that becomes a responsibility. And you see this, what is obviously a very capable person, kind of get a little fearful again of their skill set.
Yeah.
And they go in with all the nerves of driving $1 million plus apparatus, and there's a lot to learn. When you're an engineer in a fire, they always say being an engineer is like the busiest 2-minute drill of anybody's life. Firefighters have so much to do. They pull the hose, they go in, they search, but it's all fairly quick paced, right? But there is a pace to it. Whereas, man, when you're an engineer, from the moment you hit that parking brake, it's just like you got to put it in pump. You got to move some hoses around. You got to get your wheel chock on. You got to get the hydrant hooked up. You got to get first water. The radio's going off. There's just so much to do in the first 2 minutes. But you begin to watch this person learn the truck dimensions, right? They begin to deeply understand all the equipment on the truck, and then before you know it, they're this fully capable engineer who isn't afraid of anything that they're showing up to, and can place that apparatus exactly where it needs to go, and then utilize the equipment and all the resources of that truck to help the whole situation out. That there's nothing more rewarding than building an engineer. And I can imagine from a chief's perspective, there'd be nothing more rewarding than building a good captain.
Yeah.
I think it's just all stages of our life. So.
Or I guess just seeing the department run smoothly and knowing that was a product of your hard work. So
Yeah, very true.
you mentioned the injury and how that was kind of the springboard into really jumping into this whole Foundation Fortified thing. But you also said, before the show started that this was going on for a while and kind of had some roots before. Can you tell everyone how Foundation Fortified got started and kind of what it's all about?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I began meditating as a personal journey, 8 years ago or so. And when you start getting curious about mindfulness and meditation in the Western world, you have to wade through a bunch of religious dogmatism to get anywhere, right? So I did. I waded through a lot of strangeness, and I went to a lot of classes, and I met up with a lot of, and I drew a lot of fulfillment out of the practice, but I did have to kind of swallow a lot of things I disagreed with, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I did notice fairly quickly that there was a lot here as a responder to draw from. So a quick example, early on I was going to a guided session, and it was a gong session, right? So they'll use a gong, and they'll ring it, and you're supposed to do something with the mind and the sounds. But I just noticed that every time that gong rang, I had a different reaction than the other heads that were bowed down.
Sure.
I fundamentally I would jump every time. I couldn't not jump. And this is just a response to the tones constantly going off, and having to respond and wonder what comes next. Wonder how the next 3 hours or whatever of your life are going to play out for you based on the mistake of someone else or based on a terrible event, right? And so I could go to these practices and sit with this gong and slowly feel my body's physiological response soften more and more. And before I knew it, I could feel the difference at the station when the tones would go off. Instead of having my body respond in a way that I would then have to calm down, gather myself, and then listen, I could just listen. There wasn't this extra step that was getting in my way of doing my job. And Foundation Fortified was more or less built on that idea almost 6 years ago. But being a family man, raising boys, being a captain, just doing the whole thing, it collected dust on a bookshelf for a while. And then this injury has just given me the opportunity to finally, get it off the ground and hopefully bring mindfulness into, the public service sector, first responders. I really believe that first responders could draw a lot from a daily practice. But my entire goal is to separate the religious dogmatism out of this practice.
Sure.
Sure. You'll find no religiosity with my teaching. It's simply the practice. It's simply the scientifically backed, understanding of what we're actually doing and what we're actually gaining from meditation, without your chakras and finding the nirvana or anything. There are plenty of deeply religious or spiritual insights that you can have through meditation practice, and believe you me, they're definitely worth having. However, we don't need to apply some deity behind a curtain or some beliefs about the afterlife in order to feel them. We can just feel them and then understand what we're trying to cultivate with our minds while we're in our mindfulness practice. So Foundation Fortified is fairly young. I think I got off the ground in July, and currently what we're up to is I'm building my first course. Hopefully by November you'll be able to see it out there on foundationfortified.org. There'll be some free content for all first responders. I believe all first responders should have this practice in the tool belt as something to try and to understand if you're having difficulties with the job, right? There is something here for traumatic responses and for understanding how you respond to different stimulus, right? I believe all first responders should be trained with this tool. It's just hard to go discover. And so that's what I'm trying to build at Foundation Fortified is something that any department or any organization can click play to with their recruits and run them through like a 10 or 15 day course for free just to understand mindfulness. And then for anybody else who wants to go deeper and develop a mindfulness practice, I'm hoping to have subscriber content out there. So
This might be a loaded question, but you talked about how with your meditation and your journey there, associating the gong with the tones, kind of a long-term thing, kind of maybe associated with something like PTSD. But obviously we deal with things also like, depression and anxiety, panic attacks, things like that. When it comes to meditation and mindfulness, how does that look long-term compared to short-term when you're dealing with something like a panic attack? Hey, you. That's right. You looking at me, looking back at you through the little lens there. or if you're not watching the podcast, if you're listening at home, are you looking for a cool t-shirt? Maybe a t-shirt to rep your favorite podcast, the Spinning Our Gears podcast, the one that I'm wearing right now. Do you want a cool t-shirt like that? Or maybe a cool vinyl decal to put in your car or your water bottle or wherever you want to stick it. That sounded wrong. Wherever you want to put that sticker. Do you want something cool like that? Then go to www.spinningourgears.com and click the merch link, the Spinning Our Gears gear link. That's where you find an awesome t-shirt just like this, as well as some vinyl decals and all sorts of cool stuff. You can also find the book, Imposters on the Throne, Warriors in the Shadows. You can find that at www.spinningourgears.com as well. Go, click that link, get some cool gear. You can listen to the podcast while you're doing it. Go get yourself some cool merch. All right. Back to the show.
It's a great question. So, let's take the case of anxiety, right? Panic attack. All right. Now, mindfulness meditation is done on a cushion, okay? And that's what we see when we see people sitting, right? They're meditating, whatever that means, okay? But what we're actually trying to develop is this skill called mindfulness. Okay? And mindfulness is just an ability to notice your moment-to-moment experience without applying any judgment to it. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So here I am, and I'm focused on the breath. I'm meditating now. And I begin to feel a little bit of anxiety, maybe after a call I had last night. You know, they tell you to focus on the breath. You ran a call where somebody had their final breaths, and now you're a little worked up during your mindfulness session, okay? The crucial thing to notice in moments like that during meditation is that you aren't under any threat here, right? You're the victim of this mental imagery. You're the victim of this memory. And as long as it's going to play out, you're going to have this physiological response. But the way we do our own damage to ourselves is by attaching to those memories, to those thoughts. And then we run them through the mind over and over again, wondering if we did something different, wondering if being frustrated with the universe for allowing this child to fall in the pool for the first place, right? Why did that have to happen? That shouldn't have had to happen, right? And when we just attach to these thoughts in a way that keeps us amplified for far longer than we need to be. Now, getting back to your question, you're in your mindfulness session and you have this bit of anxiety. And you notice whatever change comes with it. And then you can just let it go. And it might come back as quickly as you let it go. But doing this process over and over again is mindfulness meditation, okay? And so years down the road, when you've practiced this ability to notice anxiety, notice your post-traumatic stress or your anxiety or your depression, and notice how it arises in the body and in the mind, years down the road, you can deploy that skill effortlessly when you do have a moment of anxiety in the real world, right? And you don't even need years. You can obviously have a meditation practice for only several months and begin to practice this skill. But people who have been with the practice for decades, very rarely do you see them respond with an emotion that seems unwarranted. And very rarely do they hold on to an emotion any longer than they have to. You know, they're as skilled as anybody about letting go and not identifying with emotions or actions that don't seem to fit the current problem, that don't seem to hold the keys to moving forward in the world. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think one of the things you said that we need to harp on, though, especially it was one of the undertones that you said. Obviously, first responders, we are very type A. We want that instant gratification. We want the, right now. If we go find a therapist and it doesn't work out, we quit altogether, right? Mm-hmm. You mentioned that, the expertise comes after years and decades, but even you just said that you can notice a change within a couple of months, correct?
Oh, yeah. True expertise in mindfulness meditation can be found in even 4-year-olds, right? There's nothing in principle about mindfulness that you need to train. It's years of bad behavior that we're actually trying to train out of in mindfulness meditation, okay? Imagine, to say that first responders want immediate results isn't to know first responders, right, in a way. Because every first responder who is there in uniform has clearly had to put a large amount of effort toward training, toward self-discipline, right? Toward being there and sacrificing yourself for another person, right? So, I mean, first responders actually know what it's like to give a lot of themselves. And I think it's for that reason, only once you have the career, that you kind of want things to come a little bit quicker, right? Because I'm only me today. Because the next 2 days, I got to be firefighter Josh, right?
Right.
So I want what I want today, and I'm not going to have much patience for things to not go my way. And I think that's where first responders get this impression of being a little bit less patient than we otherwise are. I mean, every responder knows what it's like to go on scene of a slow-moving incident and have to completely deal with whatever hunger or whatever lack of sleep, and just know that tomorrow I'm going to be tired. Tomorrow I'm going to be tired. So first responders do have a lot of these skills. It's just applying them becomes a little strange. But mindfulness gives us the opportunity to cultivate and practice some of these skills so that we can deploy them, no matter what uniform we're wearing, whether we're civilians, whether we're our responders, spouses, whether we're our children, whatever role we happen to be playing at any given moment, we can be the same person without responding to whatever emotional baggage you happen to be carrying that day because of whatever happened, whatever story you happen to be telling yourself about your experience.
I'd love to hear, I guess I'll give the caveat that I feel like, fire has always been a couple steps ahead of police when it comes to all-around health, physical and mental health. I'd love to hear, though, some of the struggles that you have seen or have faced trying to push the mental health agenda, if you want to call it that. What I'm seeing in the law enforcement realm is that, everyone kind of below a sergeant at this point in their career understands how big of a role mental health plays, but the admin are kind of like, hey, we want you to get help until it affects the department, and then it's a problem for them. What have you seen on your side of things from the fire world, from the captain position that you have? What kind of struggles have you dealt with there?
Our department is making a lot of moves in the mental health direction these days. I think it's getting better, for sure. I definitely think that there's a larger role. There's more research that's being produced year after year about the mental health issues that first responders are facing. But I've just begun describing mindfulness meditation as like a training routine for your mind. Okay? I mean, back in the 60s and 50s, firefighters were dying left and right from heart disease. We still are, in a large measure. But it wasn't until we started teaching our recruits what physical fitness was, and what maybe you should eat a little bit. We were actually putting this into our training academies, paid for by tax dollars, because we understood that this time that the taxpayers are using to train these people on how to be physically fit and eat healthy is going to save countless suffering and countless dollars in the future, right? And I believe that's where we are here with mindfulness, okay? I really believe we neglect this practice at our own peril as first responders. I want to see mindfulness meditation being taught to recruits all over the world. Not as like, we're going to go teach you the fundamental truth about being a living sentient being. No. No. You can come to Foundation Fortified and get all kinds of crazy with that stuff if you want. But I do believe that a basic sense of mindfulness, skilled mindfulness, should be taught to human beings who are going into inhuman situations and dealing with the chaos of whatever you happen to be responding to that day. I believe that if you want to understand your own mind, you've got to sit down and observe it. And it's that simple. And I believe the lack of observing our minds, because we're always looking through our phones, we're never bored anymore. Boredom... I remember being bored in the 90s as a kid. There wasn't always something to do. And I just remember being hours just kind of watching the sun fall. I mean, imagine going back even 200 years without a television. I mean, there were just hours upon hours of reflection. They call it navel gazing for a reason, okay? Wasting time through boredom is actually a very healthy thing for human brains. Allows us to wrestle and to notice what's bothering us. It allows us to sit back and maybe forgive our family, our friends for things that they did to us in the past, but we're never giving ourselves that opportunity anymore. We're just constantly lighting the match of the next thing that's going to keep us interested. Mindfulness meditation is something that as people, as human beings, now more than ever, with our attention constantly under siege, but also as just first responders, again, we've got to get to a point where we understand that these are just minds, brains, that we're putting into catastrophic situations day in and day out. And in the same way we got to train our bodies to be ready for the job, we've got to start getting to a point where we train the minds to respond to the job. And as our scientific understanding of mindfulness meditation begins to move forward, it's just getting harder and harder to ignore the utility of sitting down with focused attention. Don't call it meditation. Just call it focused attention. Sitting down with focused attention for 10 minutes a day has wide-ranging effects for your mind, for your body, how you respond to the world, and how you respond to your internal world, right? So I deeply want to, I see myself more as an advocate for mindfulness meditation in the field of first responders. But I'm also kind of applying for a role to be your mindfulness instructor as well. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how I see Foundation Fortified. But on some level, I just believe that recruits are going to be taught this skill someday. At least,
is there anything
that would be my hope.
You kind of covered it a little bit, but is there anything or idea or suggestion that you would give to that person, either chief or new recruit, that is just like, nah, it's not for me? What would be the one thing that you would say to try to get them to sway into, yeah, you need to start focusing on mental health. You need to start focusing on your mindfulness.
I don't know if I've considered that.
It's kind of a loaded question, I know.
No, it's not a loaded question. It's an interesting question. If somebody came to me, having tried it, and said, mindfulness meditation isn't for me, I would have to agree with that person, right? I believe anybody can draw value from mindfulness meditation. Now, there are some people I believe should maybe do it with an asterisk. There are some people with enough mental health disturbances that maybe you don't want to be alone in there for too long without the guidance of somebody else. I could see that, and that's where self-guided meditation might not be for these people, right? But if somebody wasn't open to the idea of meditation, I think the only thing I could tell this individual would be that on some level, you are always using your mind. Your mind is the one tool that you offer to others. It's the one tool you use to solve your problems. It's the one tool you hope to turn off to be able to get some sleep. It's the one tool you always have on you. It just makes sense to sharpen it, little by little, every single day. We're not trying to go into a mindfulness retreat and just meditate so hard for 7 days that we come out completely solved and a brand new human and will never have a moment of anxiety again. No, it's like anything else. You could work out for 24 straight hours as hard as you can and make very little progress in your physical health overall. But it's in that going every single day to eat right, to show up and do a few push-ups. That's where long term you start to shape your body. And in the same way, you can shape your mind. That would probably be my best answer to anybody who said it just wasn't for them.
I love it. I do. I got to tell you, man, whenever you can go 40 minutes as quickly as we have, that it's been a great episode. Before I start to wrap this up, I want to know, is there anything else that you want to cover? And then most importantly, how do people get a hold of you?
Anything that I have to cover about the mind or about human nature or about what it is to be a responder, looking out in the world mindfully, can definitely be found on any of my pages and in my content for sure. But the only thing I would suggest here to your listeners is mindfulness meditation itself has existed for thousands of years, okay? And believe you me, if we would have found a better way of developing these skills by now, I'm sure somebody would have done it. There's a lot of back-breaking effort that goes in to meditating in a cave for 10 years, right? And some people are very committed to that project for a reason. Now, I'm not suggesting that, I don't even intend to live my entire life just focused on the mind. But there is something about the nature of your experience that you can discover if you just are willing to pay close enough attention. It takes some work to cultivate that attention, and that's what mindfulness meditation is for the first little while, is just being able to, cultivate your attention in a way that you can even focus on the breath without getting distracted in the next moment. But there is something to be gained by this simple, ancient practice. And as a first responder, I would just implore you to give it a try. I would just implore you to sit down at some point and try to develop this skill, so that at any point, if you're ever struggling, stressed out, confused, and don't want to sign up for a therapist, or don't want to, you can go within in the privacy of your own mind and begin to weed through some of the things that are constantly disrupting your thoughts and emotions. So,
how do people get a hold of you?
So you can definitely message me through Facebook. You can definitely message me through Instagram. I do have an email, foundationfortified@gmail.com. Stand by in the near future. I'm hoping by November 1st to completely redo our website and have like I said earlier, a full curriculum out there for people to explore and start to understand this skill, and especially with with your unique challenges as a first responder in mind. I'm also hoping to have supporter content out there. I've got 2 mindfulness meditations up for supporters already. One's called Loneliness for Supporters. This is for husbands, wives, parents, and anybody who supports a first responder and who struggles with that feeling of loneliness from time to time. And I also have one for young children. It's called, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a mindfulness meditation for young kids and when they're missing their mother or father who's actively working duty right now. So, I do want to bring home a full course for first responders on mindfulness meditation, and come November 1st, we're going to have the first round of things out there for everybody to go out and try. So.
That's very awesome. We always talk about the family side of things, but I didn't even think about that when it comes to this. That's very, very cool. I personally, I am looking. Oh, go ahead. Please. No, you absolutely.
I was just gonna say I've been married for 16 years, and I've got an 11-year-old boy and a 9-year-old boy, and someday my kids will be mad at me for forcing them to try meditation at such a young age. Maybe they won't, but the resources out there for teaching children mindfulness, they're not great. They're good.
Right.
You can get any kid into a session, but being able to give your kid an actual practice that they can develop with and work with, there just aren't many resources out there. So I'm hoping Foundation Fortified can be the answer, at least for first responder families, if you want to introduce your child to this practice, if your supporter wants to try this practice as well.
Sure. I think that is very, very awesome. The listeners at home know that I've been big into ice baths and box breathing, but I'm looking forward to this stuff coming out and trying to combine the two and kind of do my own little regimen there. I think this is going to be very, very cool. So I am very much looking forward to the November time frame when these videos start to come out. I want to thank you.
I'll send you everything.
Excellent. And then we'll forward stuff and put stuff on our website and on social media as well. So, Josh, I can't thank you enough for coming on. What's that? Sorry, we do have a little bit of a delay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's a little bit of a delay there. No big deal. No, I was just going to thank your listeners, and thank you for having me on. I'm just lucky to be here in this space doing what I'm doing, and I just hope that, I hope the industry is ready for this practice. I hope the industry is open to the idea of it. And it is, many of us come with some strange ideas about what mindfulness looks like, so I'm hoping to demystify a little bit of that here come November for a lot of responders. But I just want to thank your listeners for giving this episode a listen, and thank you for having me on. Anytime you want to, have me back on, I'd be glad to come. So.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. And like I said, I want to thank you for coming on. Just like Josh said, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. You guys are what fuels my fire and what keeps me going. We've been fortunate enough to have guests on and interview topics where we've been able to put out 2 a month. I think we're going to continue to do that throughout the rest of the year. So thank you all very much for tuning in. Stay safe, and we'll get through this together.